There is one mountain on Earth that no human has ever climbed, not because it's impossible, but because the world chose not to. Four religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Burn, all point to this mountain, each with a different story and the same warning. At its base lie two lakes, one calm, one lifeless. Light and shadow side by side. Ancient monuments across the world form a strange geometric connection with this mountain at the center. Even Antarctica appears in the same alignment. One man, the yogi Milarepa, is said to have reached the summit, not by climbing, but by transcending. Others who tried to climb it returned changed. Some aged faster than time allowed. Russian scientists studied the mountain, measured it, and still refused to climb it. In this documentary, we explore the myths, the science, the religions, and the unanswered questions behind the world's most mysterious mountain. Let us explore Mount Kailash. Before there were maps, before borders divided the earth, before religion had names, there was a mountain. Not the tallest, not the deadliest, but the one humanity chose to leave alone. Mount Kailash, a place where silence is not empty, it is alive. Four religions agree on one thing: this mountain is not meant to be climbed. And in a world obsessed with conquering everything, that alone should make us stop and ask why. Mount Kailash stands on the Tibetan plateau, remote, isolated, unreachable by modern roads. Yet it is not hidden. It rises alone, perfectly shaped, sharply defined, almost symmetrical. Satellite images reveal something unusual. Kailash does not blend in with surrounding mountains. It stands apart, as if placed. And from this single location, four of Asia's greatest rivers are born: the Indus, the Brahmaputra, the Sutlej, and the Karnali. Water that feeds over 1 billion people. Ancient cultures didn't call this coincidence. They called it the center. In Hindu belief, Mount Kailash is not symbolic. It is literal. This is where Lord Shiva lives. Not in a palace, not on a throne, but in meditation. Shiva is not a god of conquest. He is the destroyer of illusion, ash-covered, still, detached. Hindu scriptures say time bends at Kailash. That reality softens. This is why no temple crowns its summit. The mountain itself is the temple. Pilgrims do not climb towards Shiva. They walk around him. Because divinity is not something you stand above. It is something you humble yourself before. To Tibetan Buddhists, Mount Kailash is Kang Rinpoche, the precious snow jewel. It is believed to be the home of Demchok, a deity of supreme bliss. But Kailash is not climbed, it is circled, because the mountain is seen as a living mandala, a three-dimensional spiritual map. Each step around it is meditation. One full circumambulation is believed to cleanse a lifetime of karma. 108 rounds, liberation. The lesson is simple. The journey matters more than the destination. Before Buddhism, before Hindu influence reached Tibet, there was Burn, the indigenous spiritual tradition of the land. For Burn practitioners, Mount Kailash is the seat of the sky goddess Sipaimen. Their pilgrims walk the mountain counterclockwise. Opposite direction, not rebellion, balance. Burn teaches that truth has more than one path, and even opposing journeys can lead to the same silence. To Jains, Mount Kailash is Ashtapada, the place where Rishabhadeva, the first Tirthankara, attained liberation. No violence, no conquest, no attachment. Jainism teaches that liberation is achieved by removing weight from the soul, so no one climbs the mountain. Because freedom is not about reaching higher ground, it is about letting go. Just a few kilometers from Mount Kailash lie two lakes that should not exist together. Lake Manasarovar, known as the Lake of the Gods. Fresh water, calm and reflective, considered pure enough to cleanse karma. Pilgrims drink from it. Lake Rakshastal, known as the Demon Lake. Salt water, no life, violent winds, dark blue to almost black. No pilgrims bathe here. Here's the impossible part: they sit side by side. They do not mix, no visible barrier, no geological explanation that fully satisfies scientists. Ancient texts say one lake was created by the gods, the other by demons. Yin and yang, light and darkness, positive and negative energy, perfectly balanced next to Mount Kailash. Ancient texts describe a world axis, a vertical line connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld. In Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, this axis is called Mount Meru. Many believe Mount Kailash is Mount Meru. Now here's where it gets interesting. When you measure Earth symbolically, not with modern GPS but with ancient proportional geometry, Mount Kailash sits near the planet's vertical balance line between the North Pole and South Pole. Not exact to the meter, but exact in ratio. Ancient civilizations didn't measure distance like we do. They measured meaning. North Pole, the crown of Earth. South Pole, the root. Mount Kailash at the heart. The same pattern exists in the human body. Coincidence or design? One of the most controversial claims surrounding Mount Kailash, the distance from Mount Kailash to the South Pole mirrors the height of Kailash multiplied by 100,000. To scientists, this sounds impossible. But ancient builders didn't use meters. They used scaled cosmological units. The same symbolic scaling appears in Egyptian pyramids, Vedic architecture, ancient temples worldwide. This doesn't prove construction, but it suggests intentional placement. The question is no longer, is it exact, but why does this pattern keep repeating? Aligned perfectly to solstices, solar cycles, astronomical events. Now place Stonehenge on a global map. It sits on a ley line, a straight energetic path linking ancient sacred sites. Trace that path eastward. It points toward Tibet, toward Mount Kailash. Stonehenge appears to be a receiver. Mount Kailash, the source. Two cultures, no contact. Same cosmic obsession. Now draw a triangle on Earth. Mount Kailash in Asia, the Great Pyramid of Giza in Africa, and Easter Island in the Pacific. These 3 points are isolated, spiritually significant, use impossible stonework and sit far from population centers. The Great Pyramid aligns to true north with near-perfect accuracy. Mount Kailash aligns naturally, without construction. Easter Island statues face inward, not outward, as if watching something inside the planet. Some believe this triangle marks Earth's energy framework. Others say it marks something we were never meant to disturb. Machu Picchu sits on another major ley line, associated with serpent energy, Incan earth energy worship. When traced globally, this ley line curves toward Tibet, ancient cultures that never met, yet chose mountain peaks, high vibration points and astronomical alignments. Coincidence or shared forgotten knowledge? From above, Mount Kailash looks unnatural. Perfect symmetry, sharp edges, flat faces. No other Himalayan peak looks like this. Geologists say erosion did it. Critics ask why only here? Why the most sacred mountain on Earth? And why does the south face form a natural swastika, an ancient symbol of eternity and cosmic order, long before modern misuse? Local legends say the mountain is hollow. Hidden tunnels exist. Enlightened beings enter and exit. Some monks claim the mountain is not stone. It is a structure. No one can prove it. No one is allowed to check. Many famous climbers tried or asked to climb Kailash. In 1955, the Chinese government banned climbing permanently. In 1985, Reinhold Messner, one of the world's greatest climbers, was granted permission, then refused himself. Messner later said, "If you conquer this mountain, you conquer something in people's souls." Since then, no climbing permits have been issued. There are no recorded summit photos and no drone footage near the peak. Among all the legends of Mount Kailash, only one name is ever spoken as having reached its summit: Milarepa, the great Tibetan Buddhist yogi and saint. Milarepa lived in the 11th century. Before enlightenment, he was believed to have practiced dark magic driven by anger and revenge. Racked with guilt, he later devoted his life to extreme spiritual discipline, meditation and isolation. According to Tibetan tradition, Milarepa did not climb Mount Kailash, he ascended it spiritually. Legend tells of a challenge between Milarepa and a powerful Bon priest named Naro Bonchung. Both claimed spiritual mastery. Both sought to prove whose path was true. The challenge: whoever reached the summit of Mount Kailash first would be victorious. At dawn, the Bon priest began climbing using ritual magic. Milarepa did not climb. He is said to have sat in meditation, and at the final moment, rose on a ray of sunlight, reaching the summit instantly. The Bon priest was defeated, not by force but by realization. Milarepa's story is not about altitude, it is about transformation. A man who once used darkness, who purified himself completely, and was therefore no longer bound by the mountain. This is why Kailash is never described as punishing. It does not age you, it does not kill you. According to Tibetan belief, Mount Kailash reflects exactly what you bring to it. In Tibetan belief, this is why no human has climbed Kailash since. Milarepa did not conquer the mountain. He did not leave footprints. He did not claim ownership. He was already empty of ego. Monks say, Kailash cannot be climbed by effort. It is reached only when there is no one left to arrive. This is why modern climbers are forbidden, not because they lack skill, but because the mountain is not a test of the body. It is a test of self. Another strange observation. Birds avoid flying over the summit, aircraft avoid the airspace, and even drones fail near the peak. Some claim sudden downdrafts, magnetic disturbances, or pressure anomalies. Others believe something about the mountain disrupts natural navigation. Animals sense what humans ignore. Now we go global. Ancient Hindu texts describe Mount Meru as located at the center of the world, surrounded by concentric lands and oceans. Some alternative researchers suggest ancient maps were pole-centric, not continent-centric. What we call north today may not have been north in the past. This brings us to Antarctica. Maps like the Piri Reis map of 1513 and the Orontius Phineas map of 1531 show Antarctica without ice, with river systems beneath current ice sheets and coastlines accurate beyond 20th century surveying. Ice core data suggests Antarctica has been frozen for thousands of years. So who mapped it? And more importantly, why do some reconstructions place Mount Kailash at the geometric center of these ancient world maps? Some scientists accept that Earth's magnetic poles shift and that catastrophic pole reversals happened in the past. Alternative theorists believe ancient civilizations existed before the last major shift, and their north was not our north. If true, Mount Kailash may once have aligned directly with the true planetary axis, and Antarctica may have been temperate land. This would explain advanced mapping, global sacred alignment, and the sudden loss of ancient knowledge. Some theories suggest Mount Kailash is a planetary stabilizer, a frequency regulator, or a natural or artificial Earth resonance node. It's no coincidence. Schumann resonance studies often focus on Himalayan regions, and many monks meditate exclusively facing Kailash. The mountain isn't worshipped, it's listened to. So ask yourself, why hasn't this mountain been fully scanned, drilled, or studied with modern technology? The official reason is respect for religion. But what's the unofficial reason? Perhaps no one wants to answer what might be found. According to the most repeated version of the myth, the climbers were from Siberia, part of the former Soviet Union, active sometime between the late 1950s and early 1960s. They were described as experienced Siberian mountaineers accustomed to extreme cold and isolation, not pilgrims or spiritual seekers, possibly connected to scientific or military-backed expeditions, which was common during the Cold War. Their ages before the climb were consistently said to be between their late 20s and early 40s, physically strong, healthy, and mentally sharp. Why that time period matters. The Soviet Union was aggressively exploring extreme environments. There was strong belief in human dominance over nature, and very little information left the region, making secrecy believable. They reportedly believed Mount Kailash was just another unclimbed peak, not something sacred or forbidden. The story does not claim they reached the summit. Instead, it says they began ascending higher than any previous human attempt, ignored local warnings, and continued even as conditions became increasingly strange. As they climbed, they later claimed their sense of time began to feel distorted, movements felt heavy, then suddenly rushed, and breathing and heartbeat felt out of rhythm. Several versions say they noticed the sun's position didn't match how long they felt they had been climbing. Shadows appeared unnaturally long, and fatigue came on suddenly, like years of exhaustion compressed into minutes. At a certain point, panic set in. They believed something was physically wrong, not spiritually, and decided to turn back. They were convinced they had only been gone a few hours. The story does not claim they reached the summit. Instead, it says they began ascending higher than any previous human attempt, ignored local warnings, and continued even as conditions became increasingly strange. As they climbed, they later claimed their sense of time began to feel distorted. Movements felt heavy, then suddenly rushed, and breathing and heartbeat felt out of rhythm. Several versions say they noticed the sun's position didn't match how long they felt they had been climbing. Shadows appeared unnaturally long, and fatigue came on suddenly, like years of exhaustion compressed into minutes. At a certain point, panic set in. They believed something was physically wrong, not spiritually, and decided to turn back. They were convinced they had only been gone a few hours. When they returned to their base camp or nearby settlements, witnesses reportedly did not recognize them. The most striking details repeated in the myth. Hair had grown long and completely gray or white. Beards were long, thick, and untrimmed. Faces were deeply lined, skin appeared thin and aged, and bodies were stooped and weakened. Men who left in their 30s were mistaken for men in their 70s or 80s. Some reportedly needed help walking. The shock came when they were questioned. They insisted they had been gone only a few hours. They could not explain the physical change, and they were confused by the reactions of others. The contrast between their memory of time and their physical condition is what made the story spread. According to the myth, the aging did not stop after their return. Over the following weeks and months, their physical health continued to decline. Joints stiffened rapidly, teeth loosened or fell out, and vision and hearing deteriorated. Psychologically, they changed just as much. They became withdrawn and emotionally flat, avoided conversation, showed fear when discussing the climb, and had recurring nightmares. When asked what they experienced higher up, they reportedly said very little, using phrases like, "Time moved incorrectly," "We should not have gone there," or "Something followed us back." As for how long they lived, some versions say several died within months. Others claim a few survived 1 to 2 years at most. None are said to have lived a normal lifespan afterward. Their deaths were described as natural but accelerated. Organ failure, extreme frailty, or simply the body giving up. Because there are no official records, explanations remain speculative, even within the legend. The most commonly suggested possibilities are 1. Extreme physiological stress. Rapid ascent, hypoxia, and exhaustion may have caused severe metabolic shock, hair whitening due to stress, and long-term organ damage. But this does not explain the apparent aging or hair growth. 2. Psychological time distortion. High altitude, isolation, and stress can alter perception of time, memory formation, and awareness of bodily change. Some suggest they were gone longer than they believed, but witnesses insist the timeline doesn't match. 3. Radiation or geomagnetic anomaly. A popular Soviet-era explanation in the legend suggested unusual geomagnetic fields near the mountain, possible radiation exposure, and cellular damage accelerating aging. No evidence, but it fits Cold War scientific thinking. 4. Religious interpretation. Monks and locals rejected all scientific explanations. They believed the climbers crossed into a space outside human time and returned carrying the effects of that exposure. The aging was not damage, but time catching up all at once. In this view, the mountain didn't harm them, it corrected them. The scientist most often linked to this mystery is Ernst Muldashev, a Russian researcher and ophthalmologist who led multiple expeditions to Tibet and Central Asia in the 1990s, building on older Soviet-era theories. Although he was not part of the original 1950s Soviet system, Muldashev claimed he was given access to archived Soviet research notes, military-era geographic studies, and Tibetan monastic knowledge never shared publicly. His interest began after repeated Soviet-era reports described climbers near Mount Kailash, aging rapidly, growing long hair and beards, and returning physically altered. Muldashev believed this was not folklore, but evidence of an unknown physical phenomenon affecting the human body and time itself. Muldashev's most controversial claim was the existence of what he called time mirrors. According to his research, certain massive rock formations near Kailash are perfectly curved. They form natural geometric structures, unlike random mountains, and these formations act like mirrors, not for light, but for time and biological processes. He claimed these rock surfaces could reflect time inward, compress years into hours, and accelerate biological aging inside their field. In his theory, a human standing within this zone would experience normal perception, while their cells age rapidly. This was his primary explanation for sudden aging, rapid hair and beard growth, and the climbers believing only hours had passed. Muldashev strongly rejected the idea that the climber's condition was psychological. He argued, hallucinations cannot create white hair, stress cannot grow long beards overnight, and fear alone cannot destroy organs in months. Instead, he proposed accelerated cellular aging. According to his theory, cell division sped up abnormally, cellular repair mechanisms failed, and aging processes that normally take decades occurred in days or weeks. This also explained why the aging continued after the climbers returned. Their bodies collapsed quickly, and death occurred even after leaving the area. In simple terms, their bodies had already lived through those years, even if their minds had not. To avoid spiritual explanations, Soviet-style science looked for environmental causes. Muldashev claimed the region showed signs of powerful geomagnetic anomalies, disruption to human nervous systems, and distorted circadian rhythms. Some versions of his theory suggest unknown radiation from deep geological layers, ancient rock formations emitting energy, or a natural field that interferes with biological clocks. This was used to explain loss of time perception, physical collapse and memory gaps. While never proven, these explanations matched Cold War thinking, that nature itself could weaponize time against the human body. Muldashev's claims were never accepted by mainstream science. Reasons include no reproducible experiments, no instruments capable of measuring time distortion, conflict with established physics, and association with mysticism and ancient belief systems. Even in Russia, his work was labeled fringe science. However, his research gave the legend structure, a reason for sudden aging, a mechanism for time distortion, a scientific language to describe what monks already believed. According to Muldashev, the climbers did not break a rule of religion. They entered a zone humans are biologically unable to survive. And when they left it, time had already taken what it was owed. Across history, humans have climbed everything they could reach. They crowned peaks, carved stone, planted flags, and called it victory. But in the middle of our world, there is one mountain we chose not to conquer, not because we lacked the strength, but because across cultures, languages, and centuries, people felt the same quiet truth. Some called it the home of Shiva, seated in eternal stillness. Some saw it as Demchok's mandala, where every step becomes prayer. Some knew it as the seat of the sky goddess. Others believed it was where a soul finally becomes free. Different paths, different names, one silence. Mount Kailash was never crowned with temples, never scarred by footsteps, never claimed by any one belief. It did not ask for worship. It asked for humility. Pilgrims don't climb it. They walk around it, slowly, as if circling a truth too large to face directly. Two lakes rest beside it, one calm, one dark, as if reminding us that light and shadow exist together, always. Ancient maps pointed towards centers, not to rule them, but to remember them. And when humanity learned how to fly, we still chose to look away. Maybe Mount Kailash is only stone and snow, or maybe it is the last place on Earth where we remembered that not everything is meant to be touched. In a world that measures worth by conquest, Kailash stands as a question. What if the highest wisdom is knowing when to stop? And so the mountain remains, unclimbed, unchanged, unanswered, waiting, not to be conquered, but to be understood.